Okay, everybody, here we are, off to a great start. um, so here's my horror movie podcast. We're starting very appropriately on the 13th of October. Unfortunately, it's not a Friday the 13th. That would be really cool and spooky. But nonetheless, we're starting. I did this last year, and I'm gonna tell you right now. I'm gonna do a little bit of an intro. This one will be a little bit longer than the other ones, just because I wanted to get into it. But yeah, some backstory for this, for anyone that's listening that's curious. I don't know. Last year I did a horror movie podcast, and I did a couple. I did mostly unknown stuff. I did do a big one on some Halloween films, the Michael Myers films. But I did some lesser known films and TV shows that I liked, and I put that on SoundCloud and because I'd used that in the past and I thought that would be good. But of course, SoundCloud is it's kind of hard to find things on there, and people aren't really going wanting to go there to watch it, so it wasn't no one really watched it. And also, SoundCloud had a thing where they were basically saying you could upload like 2 hours or something of audio, and then we would charge you for a pro account. And I was like, I don't think so. At the time, I didn't want to put it on my YouTube channel, but now I'm like, of course I do. I don't. I want a, you know, because my YouTube channel is primarily cologne related, which now is kind of funny. I'm putting a lot more different sorts of subjects on there, but yeah. So I was gonna start this October 1st and do this whole thing, but I kind of got busy and everything. So whatever. We're starting on the 13th. My goal last year, my big thing I wanted to do was to kind of do it on all of the classic horror franchises. That was what I wanted to first do because I really just I wanted to have a podcast talking about all of the classic horror franchises, even if no one had watched it, just maybe even for my own enjoyment. And I didn't get to do that. So this year, that's my goal. I don't know. I can't promise that I'm going to do that, you know, but I'm going to try. We're going to start with A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 1984 film directed by Wes Craven. That's what we're doing today. And obviously my goal is to do all of them. Now they might not all be in order. I might do a Halloween movie or a Friday the 13th one or something like that. But this is what we're doing today. So some backstory to A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is kind of crazy. Now, if you know me, and maybe you don't because you're watching this for the first time, I'm a huge horror fan. I mean, that is my favorite type of film, my favorite genre. I have always been a horror fan. I was watching the Halloween films on AMC when I was way too young to be watching them. I have always just been so into them. I don't know why. It's just fun for me, and I've always enjoyed them. And so I've seen every Halloween movie. I've seen all the Friday the 13th. I've seen all of the, Texas Chainsaw Massacres, the Hellraisers. I've seen just about every damn demented thing you could think of, and I've never seen A Nightmare on Elm Street, the series. I've never seen it. Can you believe that? I know that's crazy. Somebody as big a fan as horror as me has never seen A Nightmare on Elm Street, and there's a couple reasons why. The first one is that, I originally, like I said, watched most of these movies on AMC on television. So I did see them cut and all that kind of stuff when I was a kid, with commercials and all that kind of nonsense. And they never really played A Nightmare on Elm Street, as far as I know, so I never watched it. And then as I got a little bit older and started really getting into these and buying the DVDs and things like that, I just hadn't seen A Nightmare on Elm Street, so my focus was on the other series. And then as I got more older, and more into these types of films, that was just one I hadn't seen. And I'm the kind of person where I want to see the whole series. Maybe not like sit down and watch the whole thing, but I want to have it all. I want to have a box set or something. And my whole thing that I say to myself, I guess, is that you can only see these movies for the first time once, right? I can't ever watch a Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time twice. So if I'm gonna watch this iconic film, and I'm already this deep into loving horror films, it's gonna have to be kind of special, and I'm gonna want the other ones to watch at least, in a relative time span compared to that. So I just never did. I kept putting it off and putting it off, and I couldn't find a box set or whatever. So anyway, so I was doing, I had a job this past weekend, and I had a couple days off. So me and my friend, he got the Blu-ray set of that, and he said, okay, we're finally gonna watch it. I mean, years later, and I've always been putting it off, and so we watched the first three. So today it's just the first one, but I'll be doing all of them, like I said. And wow, I think it was better for me to put these movies off because it's like a different perspective. Like, I'm somebody who knows all of the tropes of horror films, all of the tricks they employ, all of the history behind them. And it's kind of an interesting perspective to go into this film knowing all of that and still knowing how iconic Freddy Krueger is, of course, but have never seen the movie and know very little about it. I know what it's about. I've seen a couple scenes here and there from the films. I kind of watched the remake loosely. I know that's crazy that I saw that terrible remake first, but I didn't really pay attention. It was just kind of on in the background. And I did see a little bit of New Nightmare because it was on Netflix, and I thought at one point, like, oh, I'm just going to watch it because I want a good horror film to watch. But I stopped watching it because I didn't quite understand it, and I knew it was going to ruin everything. So I think it's just a very interesting perspective that I had going into this movie. And I don't know if that changed my, it was a bit biased perhaps or something like that, but, whatever. So Nightmare on Elm Street, this came out in 1984. Wes Craven directed this and wrote it, as far as I know. And New Line Cinema produced this, and I think he had also done Last House on the Left, and oh geez, what's the other iconic one? The Hills Have Eyes, the original one, which were pretty visceral compared to, well, I don't know. They were very much in your face and over the top, though, I'd say, compared to this, but this movie is quite visceral as well. But this one, was made on a very small budget. I'm not going to get too deep into the history of this, even though I did just watch a documentary on it, but because I don't want to get things wrong. I mostly just want to talk about my thoughts about it, but this was done on a shoestring budget. I think they had $1 million budget, which, is definitely not chump change, but that's not a big budget to go with, especially for what they were trying to do. And I know for sure that, like, he gave the script to them, and, like, people were like, how do we do this? I don't think we can do a lot of this stuff, and they were kind of figured it out. They had a really good special effects artist whose name I can't remember right now, but yeah, they made it work, and I think that's part of the charm, is that it was a low budget movie and it just worked so well. And I mean, like, Halloween was done on an even smaller budget. I think they probably had half the budget that this movie did, maybe even less, like 300,000. That was 78. So it was a little bit before this, but they made that work too. But that one doesn't have as much visceral effects and type of otherworldly things that you're seeing in this movie. And none of the effects in this movie really come off as cheap to me. Now, obviously, I love practical effects, so I'm always going to go for that over CGI. And I mean, they couldn't do CGI back then. But I don't know if that's quite my bias, because I really do think the effects hold up really freaking well. This movie does hold up really well, is something that struck me as watching it for the first time. Of course, there is a bit of a dated aspect to it. It's a product of the 80s, from the music and the acting and the hairstyles and what have you. Yes, there's a dated aspect to it, but yeah, I was watching this and I'm like, this holds up really well. Like, I'm not taken out of it by any of the 80s kind of nonsense going on. I mean, this is a really fucking creepy and dark film. Really creepy. There was a lot of things I had to say about it. So I know we're getting on 10 minutes into this and I haven't even started, but that's how I do it. I don't really script things. I kind of rant. That's just my style. It's how I like to do it. Hopefully you enjoy that kind of style as well. If not, whatever. So I have a little cheat sheet with me. I kind of have a plot synopsis, so I can kind of just organize my thoughts a little bit, and I have the cast names, because I am bad with names. Now, I did watch this twice. I watched the film, and then I kind of watched it with some commentary and stuff. Despite that, I still will forget people's names. That's just how I am. So, anyways, so this movie starts with, the classic character of Tina basically in a nightmare or awakening from a nightmare where she's being chased down the hallway by, Fred Krueger. And it's very dark and it's very atmospheric, and I think that that's the name of the game with this film, is atmosphere is key. And I have said this before, that sometimes, and this is just my personal opinion, it totally could be different for you, but I can sometimes I can forgive some of the plot issues of a film if the atmosphere of the film is there. Not that this film has a particularly weak plot or anything. I think it's, it's pretty good. But some films, I'm like, this has so many plot holes and it's not very good. But the atmosphere that they've set in place is so good and gets under your skin, and the imagery is so excellent that it just makes up for it. And this film kind of has both, like I said, a decent plot. I mean, a really interesting plot. And I mean, certainly for 1984, probably something fairly unique. And I think that's something to note is that, I'm watching this as a huge horror fan. I'm watching this in 2020. But in 1984, this was probably very, very unique and different from what people were used to with kind of horror films and things like that. And also, not to mention, a lot of people look back on this now having seen all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films many times. I've never seen them. You know what I mean? I know, obviously Freddy becomes quite humorous, and, Freddy's known for calling people, putting the word bitch at the end of a quip or something before he kills someone, and all these kind of goofy sort of kills and things like that. But not in this movie. He's very different in this film. The atmosphere is very different. It's much darker. It's much scarier. Freddy isn't really humorous. He has a couple quips, but he's mostly very scary and very dark. That humor aspect hasn't creeped in yet, and it really won't for like a couple more films, at least full swing. And that's another thing that I really liked about this movie, was that you don't really get a good glimpse at Freddy. I mean, you do see him, and you do see him in the light a couple times, but 90% of the time in this movie, you're going to see the side of his face, or you're going to see him in the shadows or something. So you don't really get an amazing look at his face. Now, we know what his face looks like, of course, and it's ingrained in our brains. But if you watch this with a fresh set of eyes, you don't really get to see Freddy's face that much. I thought that just added to the scary factor. That less is more approach, I always like. And of course, they were totally aware of that making this. That was employed liberally in this film. Wes Craven really, I think, knew that we don't want to put this guy in the forefront. And that's because he's, a child killer too, which we'll get to. But, I think his idea was that, in a lot of these movies like Friday the 13th or Halloween, like, you're rooting for those guys. Those are the good guys in the movie. You're rooting for Michael Myers to kill people. You want to see kills in this movie too, but you're not really rooting for Freddy Krueger because he's a child killer. And, not showing him a ton and showing him in the dark makes it so that that's not the case. It's not overdone, and Nancy is the main character. So, of course, Nancy, played by Heather Langenkamp, is talking to Tina, and they explain that they both had the same dream, and that kind of thing goes on. And then we also have Tina's boyfriend, Rod, who's played by, I can't remember his name, Nick Corey. And then we have Nancy's boyfriend, Glenn, who's played by Johnny Depp in his first movie, who looks like a 12-year-old kid. Who would have thought back then that they were working with, one of the most prolific actors of all time, really. So, so this movie employed something that I didn't know. Again, I had no clue. A really interesting thing where they really set the beginning of this film up so that you think that Tina is going to be the end girl, the main girl. And they kill her off within like 20 minutes into the film or something like that. Totally out of left field. I'm sure that shocked people back then. It certainly took me by surprise. I didn't see that coming. I didn't know. I really didn't know. I thought that was just going to be a bunch of kids, versus Freddy, and they kill her. And the way that they kill her is nuts. She gets killed in her dream, which of course everybody knows, but Freddy, lives in your dreams. He haunts you in your nightmares, and he can only kill you in your dreams. So if you fall asleep, you get pulled into his, his nightmares basically, or he goes into your nightmares. But I think you probably go into his, is what I was gathering from it. And he hurts you in that. If he hurts you in that, he hurts you in real life. If he kills you in your dream, he kills you in real life. And she falls asleep, and he kills her. And it's the iconic scene where he pulls her off the bed, and it's like she's, he cuts her with his claws, and she's being flown about the room. She pretty hilariously actually like rams into Rod and like knocks him into the like lampshade. I thought that was actually kind of funny because she like clocks him super hard, and then she's flung everywhere and she's screaming her head off, and it's fucking nuts. I mean, it is like outrageous, and it's not comical. Like, it could be really comical that this woman is being flung all around the room, hitting the ceiling. They just did it really well where you're like, that is really cool. Holy shit. And then she hits the bed and dies. Originally, I think they had her like hit the bed in this pool of blood, and blood went everywhere. But of course, the frickin' MPAA censorship group that it is was like, nope, you can't show that, or else we'll make it an X-rated film, or whatever it was back then, which is ridiculous. But it's an awesome, awesome scene. It's like, holy shit, man. And they did that in a insane way. They didn't have CGI back then, so they actually built the set of the room off the ground, and they rotated the set. Like the ceiling was actually the floor, and the floor, which was the ceiling, was like all pinned down, like the curtains were starched and everything. The camera people were strapped into chairs and shit like that. I mean, it was like crazy and really dangerous. And they've manually rotated the set. They had guys on like pulleys rotating the set. So yeah, that's pretty crazy, and people were getting like vertigo from working in it. I mean, talk about like practical effects to the extreme. That's insane. That's an amazing effect. That's probably one of the coolest effects I've ever seen. I do know that they did an effect like that in the movie Inception, where they're in the hotel hallway and it's like rotating, and they did that practically as well. I'm sure they used CGI for finishing touches, but I do know that they actually rotated that set, and I thought that looked like a cool scene too. But this is probably one of the first times, if not the first time, they did that. Total balls to the walls move. I thought that was awesome. And then, of course, Rod disappears and then, is kind of hiding out and gets caught the next day. But, of course, he's presumed to be the killer. And then, begins basically the bulk of at least the first half of the film of Rod in the police department, and they're accusing him of killing her, and they're trying to prove that it's not, but they can't really do that. And Nancy's, I haven't really talked about her much, but Nancy's dad is the sheriff or the lieutenant or whatever, Don. It's Nancy Thompson, right? So it's Don Thompson, and that's played by John Saxon, who's a veteran actor who actually just died this year, actually like a couple months ago. And it's been said before, a lot of these older horror movies, they always have like one veteran actor to kind of bring people into it. So that's him. He's an iconic actor, and he's really good in this movie. He plays his part exactly as you would expect him to. He's the really stern father, the stern sheriff or whatever, who doesn't believe his daughter or whatever. That's something that kind of struck me too, as I was like, are these the dumbest people? It's people ever. Like it's always that case where no one believes you in these movies, and that kind of does add to the nightmare feel. I've talked about that feel before. There's other films where it's kind of hard to explain. It's very esoteric. It's like this cerebral feeling in films where you have the characters that are trying to tell people that something's wrong and no one will listen. I know that that's kind of a like an iconic trope in horror films, and I get that's kind of a cliche, but I always love that because it just adds this nightmare vibe to things, and of course it couldn't be more appropriate here. Another movie, one that just comes to mind that does that is Jeepers Creepers, which is a totally different style of film, but it's these two characters running around. People are getting killed off by the creeper. They're on the run from him, and they feel helpless, and it's all this dark, sleepy town. and everybody that they try to tell either gets killed or no one will listen, and it's like you're screaming and no one will listen, and it's that nightmare vibe that I love. It's perfect. And that's how this movie feels as well. So that was just added points for me, basically. So yeah. So anyways, so Rod gets arrested, which is actually a pretty funny scene. And I will say some of the line delivery in this movie is a little funny. Like overall, I thought this was amazing, but it's got a little bit of that campy '80s line delivery. I don't know of any off the top of my head. Well, I do know one. We'll talk about it later. But he gets caught, and then so then there's a great scene where um, Nancy falls asleep in school, and actually her school teacher is played by Lynn Shay. I didn't see that coming. Um, I'm sure that this is an iconic role of hers, but again, never seen it. So I was like, oh, Lynn Shay. You've probably seen Lynn Shay in Insidious and things like that. I love her. I think she's awesome. Man, she's got to be young in this movie, probably in her 30s, I would imagine. But yeah, I mean, not a big role, but she's really great in it, of course. And Nancy falls asleep, and then um, you know, Nancy has the dream where she sees Tina in a body bag get dragged, and she sees the creepy hall monitor kind of dressed as Freddy Krueger, and she sees the body bag being dragged by an unseen force, and that's a really cool thing. And then she goes into the boiler room, and this was something I definitely wanted to talk about because I liked the movie up until now, but this scene was where I was like, this is a good movie. This is a really good film because the boiler room set that they use in this sequence is super creepy and so atmospheric. I mean, amazing. They used a real boiler room, and if my memory serves me correct, it was in the basement of a prison, I think, and they picked it because it was all old and shitty and run down, and they kind of were like, oh, this is perfect. They were going to power plants and boiler rooms, and they found this one. And now obviously they dressed it up, I'm sure, and the lighting and everything, but the basic set piece of the boiler room is a real boiler room, and it's amazing. The lighting it's got this orangish reddish light kind of simulating like the heat from the furnace and everything, and there's steam, and it's very atmospheric. The set piece was amazing. It was really amazing, and this added into the atmosphere of the film because there was like a scene where she's walking through a corridor or something, and there's pipes on either side of her, and it's this like really narrow hallway, and it just adds to this claustrophobic feeling of being in Freddy's kind of nightmare, this boiler room set. And that was something that I was thinking about, I wanted to talk about, because when you watch as many horror films as like someone like me, I'm sure a lot of you folks have felt this as well. It's like the tropes, all the tricks, this movie doesn't really have jump scares, but you know all the tricks that are going to be employed and things like that. So it's hard to watch certain scenes where it's intended to be really creepy and scary because you just know something's going to happen, and you can probably guess what's going to happen, at least for someone like me. So it's really a big plus if a movie can, I wouldn't say scare me, but at least give me that feeling of an unsettled nature, even though I know like what they're probably going to do. That's another thing that's probably a little hard to explain. I don't know if I'm explaining that totally, but that's hard to do. And they definitely did it. I know that Freddy's going to pop out at some point. I know he's going to show up and yell something. There's going to be a synth stab or something like that. But I don't know when. But they probably were aware of that. I think that Wes Craven they don't call him the master of horror for nothing. Although he wasn't, as prolific back then as he was now. But I think he was totally aware of that, and that's why he made that set piece so uncomfortable and claustrophobic. And that, particularly the scene where, it's not even a notable scene. It's like probably like 3 seconds. She just walks down a hallway, and it's a super claustrophobic hallway of pipes and stuff. And that was where I was like, this movie is on a different level. I mean, I'm like, this is well made. There is a reason why this movie is so cherished, because this is just very, very tastefully done. Don't get me wrong, I love the other ones, and I still think I probably like the first Halloween a little bit more. Very different styles, though. That one's got the stalker vibe. This is more of the like nightmarish mystery kind of psychological aspect to it almost, but I was like, this is just well made. The cinematography is stunning. I mean, throughout the cinematography is stunning, but this was like, wow, this is something else. Okay. So we're about a half an hour in or so, so I'm going to take a quick break. Probably won't sound like a break to you because I'll just pause this, but I hope you're enjoying yourself. I know that this is a little bit long-winded, but as always, I always do that. I like to rant. I like to give my thoughts to you folks. I hope you're enjoying this. I would love to keep doing this. Please watch and like and subscribe. I know that's annoying to say, but I have to, or else YouTube doesn't let people see our stuff. So yeah, let me know, on this little break right here. Let me know if you're enjoying this and what your favorite Friday the 13th, or not Friday. Well, yeah, sure, why not? Let me know what those are, but let me know what your favorite Elm Street, is, and let me know what your favorite scene in this movie is, and we'll be right back to it. All right, and we're back. Hopefully this is still recording. Okay, hope everybody enjoyed that 5-second break, which was a little bit longer for me. So, we're back into it. Now, I actually wanted to backtrack just a little bit. I don't want to backtrack too much or we'll be here for like 4 hours, but I did want to mention that opening scene when Tina's dreaming, when Freddy is coming down the alleyway and his arms extend, which is another great practical effect that they literally just had two guys on either side with fishing poles pulling it apart. Again, low budget, super simple, but very effective. That was cool because you could view that as a little bit humorous in a way, I think. But I didn't. His arms extend and he kind of gives that creepy grin and he's like running down really weird, like almost like a gesture kind of run or walk, or if you will. But that's still creepy. You got to think like you're in a dream like that, and this guy you see, and you're like, oh shit. And then his arms extend and he starts running at you. It's pretty creepy. And then I think this is the scene too where he cuts his chest open and the maggots come out. I think that's it, or that might be later. But then he cuts his finger off, and which by the way they used real maggots. They had to have an animal wrangler just for those maggots. So pretty interesting. Great special effects, of course, and I guess you could say that's like that's a little bit of that humor in there. It's very dark humor, but I would see that as a little bit of humor. But I just wanted to touch on that because I couldn't. I know someone would say, "How did you not talk about that?" That's the one thing I will say is that I will definitely, I always do this. I forget about things here and there. So if I don't mention something, I know people are going to be like, how could you not talk about that? I mean, I just forget things here and there, so you'll have to deal with that a little bit. So, anyways, Nancy burns her arm and wakes up, and she's got the burn on her arm. That's my cat, if you could hear that. So then we get to the scene where she's in the bathtub, and Freddy's glove comes out, and that's a great scene where she gets pulled under, and then her mom comes and knocks on the door and is like, I thought that scene was kind of funny. Well, for one, it was really cool. I always love those scenes where like you're like in the bathtub and like I think the original Grudge does something like that, like a hand comes out of the back of her head or something. I always like those because we always associate the bathroom or the shower or tub with like a peace of mind and like our safety zone. So I always like when they do things like that. I did think it was funny though how like her mom is like not concerned at all throughout this movie about anything. Like obviously she's like screaming at the top of her lungs and thrashing about. It's like her mom didn't hear that, and her mom comes in and is, knocks on the door and is like, "You okay in there, honey?" So I thought that was kind of funny, but and then you see that she's starting to take caffeine pills, which I think they're called like Stay Awake or something like that. Obviously she doesn't want to dream because she's aware at this point in the film that of what's going on. So then this is where the movie starts to get a little bit cerebral, at least to me, because she brings Glenn over, Johnny Depp. I got to be careful not to just continually call him Johnny Depp. And she asks him to, she's a little bit symbolic almost with it, where she asks him that, I'm going to do something. I need you to watch me. we know now we learn obviously she's going to fall asleep and try to do something, and if she starts going crazy, to have Glenn wake her up. But this is where I think the movie started to get a little bit nebulous, and if things are asleep and awake, which was a thing that I loved about this movie. I thought that that was a very you know, I don't know if that's obvious or not, but I thought it was really added to the atmosphere of the confusion and nightmare aspect, where you can't always quite tell when they're awake or not. um, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a little obvious, but it started to get a little confusing, and I wasn't confusing in a way where I was like, "Oh, this movie's I don't get." It was just it was just like adding to that like uncomfortable atmosphere of like, if you're asleep, Freddy can kill you, so you better not be asleep, and you're not quite sure if she is or not, because um, she goes to the police station, which she's in her pajamas. So then you're like, oh, okay, I guess she's sleeping. And then Freddy chases her, and then Glenn fell asleep, of course, because he's an idiot. So then they actually physically go to the police department, and she's like, something bad's gonna happen to him, because she sees Freddy walk through the bars, which was a little bit of a goofy effect where he like kind of phases through the bars. So then when they wake up, they actually go there. So you're like, okay, she was sleeping, but that's where I think it really starts, where you're like, I don't know if she's sleeping or not. And then of course they like won't do anything, which is always the case. And then Freddy, you don't see him, but he hangs Rod with the bed sheet, and hangs him. So of course they're like, oh, he killed himself because he's guilty about what he did. um, so that was kind of interesting. And then I believe, um, I'm trying to recollect, sorry, I apologize, that then they take her to the sleep clinic, which is an interesting scene where they put Nancy asleep, and then she starts freaking out, of course, and she pulls Freddy's fedora out of the dream, which literally has his name like embroidered into the fucking hat. And her mom's like, "Where did you get this hat from?" And you're like, you know that your daughter did not bring that fucking hat in with her." Like, if now is the time to start being extremely concerned about what's going on, now would be the time. I mean, and that was my thoughts when I was watching it, but we kind of learned later why they were so like, I don't know why they were so I don't even know what the word is, not like non-concerned or whatever. Fun fact, actually, the guy that played the doctor at the sleep clinic, the kind of dark hair, curly kind of guy, he's actually the voice of Roger Rabbit, which I don't think that came out until '89, but yeah, fun fact. So after this happens, Nancy's mom, whose name I haven't even told you yet because I don't remember, Marge Thompson, who's played by Ronnie Blakely, who is I guess a pretty iconic actress. I've never seen her in anything else. She's a singer too, like a country singer, and I looked her up, and she was actually pretty damn good. She was in the movie Nashville. She's kind of funny in this movie. Like, I know she's another one of those like pretty well respected actresses by this point, but I thought her line delivery in this movie was like kind of funny. No disrespect to the actress, but this was one of the things, her line delivery, sometimes I was laughing out loud at how strange it was. But I guess maybe they were trying to go for like the over the top, like everything's fine kind of, like middle class mom kind of feel. But now her mom like puts bars and shit on the windows, and locks the door and everything, which you're like, oh fuck, like I know this is going to be an ordeal. So, and then at this point in the film, this is where Nancy realizes that Freddy Krueger was a child murderer who didn't get put in jail. And this was the part of the film where I was like, okay, I knew that he was a child murderer. I've known that from just knowing the mythos and everything. And her mom explains it to her, how like her and a group of other parents kind of trapped him at this boiler room and burned him alive and everything like that. And I I don't know how I felt about this. Not the fact that he was a child killer, because that I've known, and that's that's the character. This was the part of the film where I was like, this doesn't make it a perfect film, just because it was like a little exposition heavy. And what way would they have done it? I don't know. I'm not a filmmaker or a screenplay writer, so I don't know what they could have done to make it flow a little bit better. But it did feel slightly like an exposition dump, and it works, I guess, but it's a minor nitpick of mine. I don't want to harp on that too long because this is a very fun, very well made movie. But that was definitely one part where I was like, they always do that in films where they're like, because it's kind of a mystery film as well. It has that aspect to it where you're like trying to figure out who the killer is, and it's not Rod, but is it Rod? I don't know, and it's confusing. And then they kind of pull back the curtain, so to speak, and show you the wizard. And I don't know. So that was the one part, but not a big deal. But so then of course, then we get into the scenes and stuff where she's trying to warn Glenn of everything, and she's like, I need, and then she is like telling Glenn not to fall asleep, and you're like, of course Glenn's gonna fucking fall asleep, because that's all he does the whole movie is like fall asleep when she tells him not to. And then of course that Freddy's gonna get him, and then we get into probably, I don't know if this is the most iconic scene in the movie, but for me it was certainly the one that stuck in my mind the most, where Glenn dies. He gets pulled into the bed like a suction by Freddy's glove. You see Freddy's claws come out and pull him down into the bed. And then there's just that famous scene where there's just like this fucking fountain of blood that comes out over the ceiling. I've never seen that scene before, remember? So just like the opening scene with Tina, that took me by surprise. I was like, that was fucking awesome after that happened. I mean, just from many aspects, from like just the thematic aspect, like that was an awesome way for him to die. And I wasn't expecting him to die. I thought, the two of them were going to come out together and they were going to be like looking into the sunset at the end. No, he fucking dies, and it's awesome. And another brilliant practical effect. I think they used the same set, the same rotating set, and they flipped it. And I don't think they used a cannon. I think they literally just used gravity, and they had this big ass drum of fake blood that they just let go. And they said that you could just hear it like pounding down on the floor. And talk about like a ballsy practical effect. Like you can only do that once, really, right? I mean, I don't know why they would have to do it twice, but I mean, if you drop that much blood onto the floor of a set, like how do you even clean that? I don't know. I mean, I feel like that would be a one and done deal. I thought that when I was watching it, like I hope they got it right on the first take, or else that would have been a nightmare to clean, no pun intended. So that was awesome. And then of course we have the famous scene, there's a lot of famous scenes, but then we have the scene where Nancy, her phone is being weird, so she smashes her phone because I think Freddy calls her on the phone. I don't remember exactly, but then the phone rings when it's broken, and she's like, what the fuck? And the music is really creepy here too, and it adds to the atmosphere. And then she picks the phone up, and then the tongue comes out, and Freddy's like, you're my girlfriend now, Nancy, that kind of thing. And that's like the most iconic line in the film, probably. I thought that was kind of funny. That was, again, a little bit of that humor creeping in, but still very creepy. And they were saying, like, I remember Heather Langenkamp was saying when they were shooting that sequence, she was like, this is going to be the line. This is going to be the line from the film that people are going to say. It's going to be iconic. And, of course, it is. But they knew making it that line was going to be the line. So I thought that was awesome. And then, again, like, we get into another sequence which is frustrating, but it's like the mom knows now. The mom is explained and kind of blown her cover and why she's been acting the way she is. And I didn't even mention that the mom is like drinking heavily throughout this whole film, and she's downing like bottles of vodka and stuff. And I was kind of, at that point I was like, yeah, so she's trying to deal with what had happened, and it's her way of coping with this whole thing. But also I was thinking like, oh, she's going to be drunk and asleep, and that's going to be why she's not able to help her daughter or something later on in the movie, which I don't remember if that's quite the case. If she's like drunk and can't do something, I don't remember if that happened, but I guess I took it as like that was her way of coping with what she did, or the fact that her daughter is now pulled into this, and she doesn't want to bring that kind of painful memory up again and deal with the fact that her daughter is going through this again. And So she runs over, and the police are, of course, over at Glenn's house because he just exploded into a million pieces. And, you know, there's like tomato juice everywhere, and her dad is like not really concerned with it. The police aren't concerned. Like, and I guess it's supposed to be like that because I was kind of like about to scream at the TV like, why aren't you taking this seriously? But I guess they want you to feel like that. I get it. That's how they want you to feel. Very unconcerned. Like, there's even a part where like she's screaming out of the barred windows on her house, and they're like, okay, it's okay, go back to bed. And I'm like, okay, a kid just exploded, and you have half the sheriff department over here, and there's a girl screaming across the street, and you're not like gonna immediately run over there. So now she basically tells her dad to come over in like 20 minutes, and she's gonna her I thing, because Glenn had basically told her, and I didn't mention this as well earlier. He has like a little, almost like MacGuffin sort of speech where he explains how, to turn your back on somebody in the dream, to not give them power, which, of course, she's going to try to do, in order to kill Freddy. And, when she realizes that she can bring his hat back, she gets onto the idea that if she can bring him back into the real world, they can actually physically hurt him and kill him. We all know this, but I'm just, kind of saying it for plot's sake. And then she goes into a sequence which kind of I thought was kind of funny. It's like a Home Alone sequence where they show her this montage of her making all these traps. She like puts like a sledgehammer up on the door so that when he opens the door, the sledgehammer will come down, and like all this stuff. And it was like totally reminiscent of Home Alone on the nose. Obviously, Home Alone came out like, like I don't know, like 7 years later or something like that. But that's just what it reminded me of. I'm sure it reminds everyone of that. So she does end up bringing him out of the dream and bringing him down in the basement where she lights him on fire. And then we get a sequence of Freddy Krueger on fire in the basement, like running up the stairs and then falling down the stairs and everything, which I thought was awesome. I particularly thought the scene was awesome because that kind of just, like him getting on fire, I thought there was going to be a little bit more of like a build up to it, but she pretty quickly pulls him out. He gets hit in the nuts by the sledgehammer, which is kind of funny, and then falls over the balcony. And then she brings him down and lights him on fire. And of course, I'm always like interested in special effects. So of course there's no CGI. A dude had to be lit on fire to do this. A special effects stuntman had to be on fire, which they do all the time. It's super dangerous. They wear like these big heavy clothes and gloves, and they coat their body and their skin in this really thick jelly that so that burns the jelly off before it gets to their skin. It's super, super dangerous. But a lot of times in movies when people are on fire, you see like what they're wearing. You can tell it's a stuntman because you can see the padded clothing, or they have a hood on or something like that. And I don't know, maybe I need to go back and look at it, but I didn't really see that much. I was expecting like a really fake looking hood that looked like Freddy's face, so that you could, of that the stunt guy was wearing. Sorry, my cats are like sneezing and stuff. But I didn't really see that. It really did look like Freddy Krueger. So I don't know how that was done. I did watch in the documentary that the stunt guy, it was like the longest controlled burn they had ever done up to that point. Normally it's like 10-15 seconds, but this dude like was on fire, and then he ran up the stairs, and then he fell down the stairs on fire for a ridiculously long time. And then they put him out, and then he got up and was like, okay, how'd it go? So I thought that was fucking awesome, at least from an effects standpoint. That guy, you got to have some serious balls to light yourself on fire, for one, and to light yourself on fire for that long and fall down the stairs. So then the police come over, and they go up into the room, and you see Marge, her mother, as like a corpse, like a skeleton burning in the bed. And then the like Freddy jumps out, and I think he gets on her, and they kind of sink down into the bed and disappear. So I'm like, oh shit, he killed her mom, and they just disappeared. And the dad doesn't have like any reaction. Lieutenant Thompson just kind of stares at it and like hugs his daughter like, ah, geez. And I was like, am I missing something? I'm not sure if I quite get that reaction. Like, if there's some other subtext here that I'm not getting, like they had no reaction. And then he leaves, and Freddy comes out again, and she does the whole sequence where she, turns her back to him, and then when he tries to jump at her, he disappears because she's not giving him that power that he needs, that he feeds off of the fear of his victims, and she's not allowing him that. So that was, that was a little bit cheesy. The effect when he disappears was a little dated, definitely an 80s kind of thing. But I did like the message. I liked the subtext there of like not giving him power and everything like that. And what the conclusion of this film was a little bit rushed, I think. But then at the same time, it's like, how much more could they have done, to draw it out? And also, it is always important to keep in mind that this was done on a shoestring budget. So it's not like they had the money to do this like huge 25-minute standoff, big climactic ending. They did, they had to be smart about it. And I think they did a pretty good job. It was satisfying. So now we get into the final scene where her and her mom come out, and it's pretty much just goes straight there. There's no like aftermath or anything. It goes straight to that scene of the two of them coming out. Totally different cinematography. It's super bright, and it's a nice sunny day. Totally different, light and dark. And they're both wearing white, of course. And her mom gives probably the funniest line in the entire fucking movie, which is like, she's like, "Oh, I'm going to stop drinking." And just the way she says it is so funny. Very interesting line delivery. Which actually, okay, we watched this, me and my friend, we watched that line like 3 or 4 times. It was just so funny. But I actually looked at the original script, and she says something slightly different. I don't have the script with me right now, but she does say something a little bit different that makes a little bit more sense. Like, she says something along the lines of, and I'm going to paraphrase, of course, but like, "Oh, drinking like confuses me," or it like makes me forget what's going on, or something, like just a little extra, one extra little line that kind of ties it in. But the way she says it in the actual film is kind of hokey. And then her mom's like extraordinarily goofily smiling and waving at her like the most perfect like Stepford wife like kind of mom. And she gets in, Nancy gets in the car with her friends, and Tina and Glenn and Rod are all alive. They get in the car, their little convertible, and you're like, okay, so is it a dream? I guess that was all a dream then. But you're like, of course it's not going to be. So when the hood of the car comes over, it's striped like Freddy's stripe, and they're freaking out, and they're like, they can't, the doors lock on themselves, the car starts moving away, and then Freddy's glove crashes through the window of the door and pulls her mom through it, like boom, just like rips her mom right through it. And then the film ends with the little girls jump roping and singing the 1-2 Freddy's coming for you little song. So the ending was, I like the ending. It made it a little bit confusing because which it was fine. I liked that aspect. It just feeds into the nightmare dream aspect of the film, where it's like, then none of that really happened. So she didn't actually kill Freddy. They were dreaming that whole time. So in this last sequence, this is a dream. Freddy killed them, presumably killed all those kids, and then killed the mother. Now we know that that's not all quite the case. The mother actually does die if we watch the subsequent films, but based on just watching this film, that whole sequence was a dream as well. So it does kind of make you think and go back, like when, after Glenn dies and the cops, it's like at what, she falls asleep to try to pull Freddy out, but it's like, I guess she actually didn't wake up, because then this is all a dream sequence too, because Freddy's killing them. So I did like that aspect. I know I'm starting to just kind of explain the plot, which we all know, but yeah, so this movie was amazing. It was amazing. The atmosphere of this movie was amazing. The cinematography was fantastic. It was a far cry more than what I thought it was going to be. And I just loved the way that Freddy Krueger was portrayed. I mean, Robert Englund is amazing. He is fantastic. I haven't talked about him too much, which is a shame and probably sacrilegious to an extent, but he is so creepy in this movie. And, he's a trained actor, so he has chops, and he is just, everything, his line delivery, the movement that he makes is amazing. And the fact that they put him in darkness for this movie, it's different than the other films. It's much different. This movie has, and I've only seen 2 others, the number 2 and 3, but this one has a very different feel to it. It is very dark. It's much more of a traditional horror film, but it does have more of the psychological aspect to it, I think, and just that very dark cinematography that is just beautiful. I mean, not again, and I know I'm reiterating myself, but my favorite thing about this movie was the way Freddy was portrayed. And by the way, he's not Freddy in this movie. He's just Fred Krueger. They don't call him Freddy. I don't think. I don't think they do. And you don't even really know who he is until a little bit into the movie too. So not seeing his face fully, seeing him in darkness and everything like that was my favorite part of this movie. It just the feel of this movie was great. And I've said it earlier in this podcast that that feel that movies can give is one of the most important things to me. Normally it trumps plot. Now obviously I liked the plot of this movie and I thought the script and everything was fine. It was really paced well and it's a short 90-minute film. It was really good, but the atmosphere was just so good. It was amazing. This is going to be one of my favorite horror films of all time. It might even be my second. I know I've only seen it twice. I just saw it less than a week ago, but it's that good that I was like, wow. I know it's crazy I haven't seen this famous iconic horror film ever, but now I have, and wow, I liked it. I thought I was going to like it, but I didn't think I was going to like it this much. I still think I like Halloween more, like I've said, because it just is so nostalgic to me, and that stalker vibe is so good. But this one was just something else. It was really good. And I think the documentary on this is called Never Sleep Alone. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And definitely watch that if you can, because it interviews everyone and shows the making of, and you get to see how they made all the effects and everything. But the thing that's great about it is they show alternate takes, which is really cool. And something I thought about the alternate takes that was awesome was the fact that they were showing Robert Englund playing Freddy without that voice filter on him. And, the deepened voice. And I don't know. There's a discussion to be had there about if it needs it or not. Obviously, his voice is iconic at this point, but he was doing some of these takes without that filter on, just his normal voice, and I thought that was creepy enough on its own. There was one alternate take where he got right up in the camera, doing his weird smile and with his voice, and I thought it was really very creepy. And that was a brilliant take too, which isn't even in the movie, I don't think, because he got right up in the camera and you still couldn't quite see his face. So the lighting is amazing. So yeah, so that's basically the movie. It's great all around. I mean, I suggest, if you haven't seen it at this point, which, I mean, probably most people have, obviously watch it. It's amazing. I'm going to be reviewing all the other ones, of course. I like them too. I liked 2 and I liked 3. I know that people don't really like 2. I actually really enjoyed it, and I have a lot to say about that one, so that'll be fun. And 3, which is normally the favorite one, it's definitely a fan favorite. I like that one a lot as well. I didn't like them as much as the first one because that vibe is very different and totally for me, but I thought they were great. And so I can't wait to keep watching them and reviewing them for you guys and talking about them. I can't leave without talking about the music, of course. Again, I didn't know anything about the music for this movie. All I knew was that famous, little lullaby, the little creepy, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door kind of thing. The music was done by Charles Bernstein, who hasn't really done a lot. He's done a couple horror films, but it seems like he doesn't really compose anymore. He's still alive. He's only like 75, but the music is amazing. And because this was such a low budget film, they were like, well, we can't afford an orchestra, so you're going to have to figure something out. And he said, I think I can do the music just me. I can do all the music by myself using synthesizers. So I think he recorded all the music at his house. He did everything. He played all the synthesizers, the drums, guitars, the bass. He did all the vocals. He pitch shifted his voice. So like if you listen to the opening titles, there's kind of like this ghostly sort of choir sort of sound, and that's just him singing that he's kind of manipulated. And wow, the music, I mean, I'm sure, yeah, of course the music is iconic from the series, but again, just like the movie, I didn't think I was going to like the music as much as I did. I was like taken aback by the music. I'm like listening to it now. There's a vinyl of the soundtrack, and it's got the red and green stripes on it, and I don't even own a record player, and I'm like tempted to buy that just because it's so good. I mean, I'm a sucker for synth scores. Like, obviously, I love John Carpenter's scores, which are predominantly synthesizer. So I already love that. I'm a little bit biased there. But this one was so good. It was so creepy and atmospheric. it did have a little bit of that, like, 80s synth kind of pop stuff where it's got the drum, the fake synth drums in it, which didn't really, normally I don't like that, but it didn't really distract too much. But it was very atmospheric and creepy. And if I can get a little, I'm a musician, so of course I'm going to nerd out a little bit over this, but the the main little melody, which is played on this kind of synth bell kind of thing, I really like. That's basically Freddy's motif. And then you had this little mocking theme that would happen a lot of times when Freddy would come up. And it would go from major to minor. It would go from D minor to D major, I think, or vice versa. Very, really, really simple. But it felt like a mocking thing, like Freddy was mocking you, and it's the taken right from the little nursery rhyme thing too. So I thought that was a really cool motif that I really liked, and that was played on that like sort of weird bell synthesizer thing, and I really liked that. I just thought the music was so good. It was very iconic. The second movie doesn't use that at all. They got obviously a bigger budget, so they used an orchestra. So I was surprised at how much of a feel change it was not having the synthesizers, because it added so much ambiance to this movie. Really, like, almost took away from it in a way, I think. Although we'll get there. I actually thought that was a fantastic score as well, and they do bring it back for the third one, which probably my favorite composer, if one of them, Angelo Badalamenti, did the music for the third one, and he's well known for using synthesizers as well. He did the whole Twin Peaks soundtrack, which is one of my favorites ever. So that was amazing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get there. So this is a little bit longer than I thought, but like I said, I had to do a lot of intro and all that. So I hope you enjoyed this long one. These are my thoughts. I might not have covered everything you'd like to hear, but this is just my thoughts on it. A first time viewer of this movie. I'll get to the other ones, and also we're gonna do Halloween and we just did that. Halloween and Friday the 13th. Those are the ones I want to do all of them for. That's a lot to cover, I know, but I'm gonna try to do it. If that's all I do this season, I'll be satisfied, because I've always wanted to do that. And if I don't think it's gonna happen, but if I cover all those, we'll start doing some other ones. So I hope you enjoyed this. As always, like this video and everything. It really helps me. I mostly like to hear your thoughts. That's why I do this. That's why I do YouTube. I'm not doing it for views or money or anything. I like to hear other people's thoughts on my hobbies. So let me know what you thought of this film. Let me know what your favorites, are, and what your favorite Halloweens or in horror movies in general. I'd like to hear that. And thank you for listening to me ramble today. And hopefully I will be back with you soon, and we will chat about some more horror films. I hope you're watching good movies and staying safe and enjoying yourself. This is my favorite time of year, and it's the best time of year, man. So everybody take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.